right, well, I'll start to get things started as people trickle in. I'm Liz Craig. I'm here with the Mountain Shop over in Northeast Portland, for any of you guys familiar. Skiing, climbing, mountaineering, trail running. And Ben and Lauren are two of our ambassadors, and they have graciously volunteered to do this webinar tonight. We're also joined by Eric Gabrielson, who's going to give some firsthand experience of why safety is important, even in inbound skiing where there is avalanche mitigation. There is still risk with skiing inbounds. So we're going to talk about some snow safety equipment. We'll talk about ways to reduce risks in some of these popular ski areas like Heather Canyon, Clark Canyon, places that are prone to subsurface creeks, tree wells, avalanches. And yeah, so without further ado, I'll kick it over to Ben and let him and Lauren kick things off.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Liz. Appreciate the opportunity to share some of this stuff with everyone here. Like I said, I see a lot of familiar names in our attendee list from the ski program. So excited to share with parents and the athletes alike, as well as some other folks that I know and don't know. So at any rate, as Liz had mentioned, my name is Ben McKinley. This is my daughter, Lauren. We are both fortunate enough to be ambassadors with the Mountain Shop and get the opportunity to share some of the things we love to do with all of you. Joined here with my good friend, Eric Gabrielson. He had one of the wildest experiences with things not going according to plan that I've ever heard of at Mount Hood Meadows, and wanted him to share that with all of you. Before we jump in on that, as I mentioned, our names, I'm the head coach of the Meadows race team, Big Mountain and Backcountry Ski Program. And we operate out of Mount Hood Meadows every Saturday and Sunday. And our goal is really just to explore all the terrain inbounds at the resort, and then bit by bit start expanding that outside of the resort as the athletes gain more skills. We've got 50 kids and 8 coaches currently within the program. So I feel a tremendous amount of responsibility to ensure that their desire for good times is balanced with safe returns every time. This is my daughter, Lauren. She is a racer with the Meadows race team, and she also just loves skiing everything at Mount Hood. She's done some backcountry skiing and has actually summited Mount Hood with us a couple of years ago when she was 9 with 5 other girls and actually 2 of her coaches. So she'll be sharing some thoughts here with us this evening as well. Let's see, I guess I don't really have a way of hands, but I'm assuming a lot of folks here like to ski areas on Mount Hood, like Heather Canyon, Clark Canyon, Accordion Bowl, Private Reserve, God's Wall. I don't know if we can do like a raise hand function.
Yeah, so I'll put, oh, we have a couple people raising their hands. Cool. I'm going to send a note to everyone in the chat, and feel free to send notes through there. If you've done these things, or if you're familiar with the areas that Ben's talking about, that way we can kind of get a gauge of what you guys know and don't know.
Right on. And then, so I know a lot of us have enjoyed those, skiing those areas of the resort, and increasingly what we're seeing is more people are going into these areas with avalanche safety equipment, beacons, shovels, probes, typically carried in a backpack, and even some, first aid type stuff. So, and then thinking about communication, down in Heather Canyon, the communication is really challenging when it comes to cell phone coverage and being able to get a message out. And so I've even got friends that are using inReach devices and the like to just to make sure that if something gets weird, they're in a position to do something about that and help their friends in a time of need. Speaking of that, my good friend Eric here, we were on a ski trip in the Wallowas, which was the beautiful background of his shot. He's got a story that involves another friend on the call, Ryan, that just blows my mind. So just as we think about, like, do accidents happen on Mount Hood Meadows? If you're asking that question, I think Eric's got an answer for you. So Eric, I'd like to pass the mic and have you share your experience with us here this evening.
Thank you, Ben and Lauren and Mountain Shop for gathering. I think you said it perfectly, which is it's about to get weird. And someone who loves Mount Hood, has been there, spent a lot of time there. I never thought this would happen inbounds. So I think hopefully you take away from this a bit of lessons to take with you when you're skiing inbounds. Obviously, it translates into backcountry, but I'll try to make this brief. It was a day hopefully a lot of you have had, which is it was just dumping and really deep, not very good visibility. They just dropped the lines, and so of course it's party time, and we're just headed down a place that I know really well. I was with my really good friend Ryan, and just incredible powder skiing, just hero turns. And at that moment, and again, I know the area. I've spent a lot of time there. As I'm skiing down, all of a sudden the floor drops out from under me, and I'm looking down, and it's about a 30-foot hole that I'm all of a sudden find myself going into. And so slow motion starts. I just had no time to stop myself. All I could do is just kind of close my eyes and honestly just hope that this would not end badly. Well, the good news is I was carrying enough speed that I cleared the first waterfall, and I landed in a pool of water about 2 feet deep. And the second piece of good news is my skis both snapped in half when I landed. So, and I was on vocals, and if people know, this is back in the 90s, they're still strong skis, but they both snapped right in half. And that actually saved my legs because of the fall, the impact. And I'm sitting there, water's coming down on my head. I'm in this hole in Heather Canyon. And I thought that was it. I actually thought, maybe this is it for me. It was a good run, literally, but maybe this is it. And that's when I heard a voice. I said, well, that's God. So this is it. This is the end. And I'm looking around and the water, after the waterfall, it went back under the glacier and sort of created this little snow cave and a little pebble kind of, I wouldn't even call it a beach, but just a little where the water went back under. And there was a woman laying there. She didn't look very good. She was blue. She had compound fractured both femurs. So her noodle legs, a lot of blood everywhere. And I was just like, okay, how high? And she said, I'm skiing alone. I fell in this hole. I can't feel my legs. I'm trying to keep it together. I'm like, oh, okay, great. I'm down here too. Of course, no cell phone. I had a power bar, the old power bars that were, terrible, but that's it. And so I gave her that, tried to give her a layer, tried to calm her down. She was really losing blood pretty quickly. Thinking I got to get out of here. And so I start trying to figure out how to climb out of the hole, but it's vertical ice for about 20 feet all around me. So I throw my skis up to the next layer to see, hopefully if someone could look down and see that I was in there. I mean, you couldn't see her because she was under the ice. And I'm starting to try to climb up the sides, but clearly not going to happen because I'm in ski boots and it's vertical ice. At that moment, all of a sudden, a snowboarder falls into the hole. And thankfully, I wasn't in the middle, or else he would have just crushed me. I mean, he was coming in hot. He lands, breaks his board in half, and starts losing it. I mean, he's a lot of bad language, Lauren, was going on. A lot of bad language. He broke his leg when he landed, and I'm trying to calm him down while also, and then he looks over and sees this woman down there and goes even crazier, if that's possible, because he's like, we're all gonna die, you're gonna die, I'm gonna die. I'm like, that's not helping. I understand, but were you skiing with anyone? I'm just trying to ask questions. That's not getting through this guy. So I put him next to my friend on the beach there to just kind of calm, and he's in a lot of pain. Meanwhile, I'm still trying to think, how am I going to get out of here? Because it's been about a half an hour. it's still snowing. There's really low visibility. My good friend Ryan, who was with us, thankfully went to the bottom of the chair, realized I wasn't there, went back up and tried to retrace his steps. And I can't remember if he took 1 or 2 runs, but thankfully he came to about the place that he thought I sort of disappeared, and looked over and saw my skis and sort of got the ski patrol, radioed them. They came in, they belayed in with oxygen to try to help stabilize her. Meanwhile, my good snowboarder friend is still freaking out. And I'm the last one down. The first one, they put this woman on a, I'm almost at the end of this one, but we're almost out of there, and they put her on one of those back braces, or the boards, strap her in and tie her to a snowmobile and try to pull her out of the hole where she's vertical, but then she gets turned around so her face is up against the ice. And we're trying to scream to tell everyone, stop pulling. No one could hear us because of the water. So then she broke her nose, fractured both cheeks, had eye damage from the ice so she had a rough day. She ended up being in the hospital for 3 months. She was in traction, basically couldn't walk for 6 months. And she still, actually, we were in touch for many years, and she, again, was skiing alone, had bad luck. I had bad luck. The snowboarder did, but it was all inbounds, in heather, and it was just not roped off. And so, there's plenty more of the story. I was trying to keep it short, but I ended up having to testify in the Hood River court because she tried to sue Mount Hood Meadows. That's another chapter in the story. But I guess, Ben, you'll find some lessons of what not to do. But from this story, hopefully that was helpful to paint. Anything can get weird in inbounds, especially in an area that I know super well, and just things can get overlooked and bad things can happen pretty quickly.
Wow.
Pretty lucky. Wow. I was lucky, but anyway.
Yeah, I'm certainly glad that you ended up okay, and just that you were able to be the cool head amongst all that craziness that day, Eric. Every time I hear that story, it blows my mind even more. And I'm certainly hoping that we don't have a bunch of parents now that quit the ski team for fear that we're going to take their kids spelunking anytime soon. But I can tell you, it's that story I think about when I am, escorting kids into this wild terrain, and trying to do that as safely as possible. I think some of the key takeaways here are it pays to ski with a friend who's slower than you. So for that, Ryan, we all thank you. In those days, I don't know if you had a cell phone, probably just not even had a cell phone, and certainly not a beacon to try and locate. So some great lessons there. If nothing else, by way of story, stuff can get really strange, even inbounds. And in this case, I don't look at, I guess if we think about some other situations that have happened up there, I'm not sure if anyone remembers, but even last February, there was there were 2 skiers, snowboarders that died in a single week. So just in terms of does this even happen? Why are we even talking about this? April 10th of 2019, Heather Canyon was closed for an entire week because that howitzer, that really cool artillery gun up there on Shooting Star Ridge, triggered a major avalanche that they wanted to trigger, but it blew all the way down to right where Heather Chair is in that zone. That's thousands of feet. In 2017, people might remember a gentleman from the Dowells was skiing in Jack's Woods, and he went missing right on the front end of a big storm cycle. And it took him about a week to locate him. Again, if he'd had a beacon, that would have really been helpful, whether it was to rescue or certainly to recover. And unfortunately, the list goes on. So these are things that I think about when I consider the responsibility that I've got on my shoulders. And it's almost like trying to not normalize what we do. We don't want to send a picture that just because we had a great day and an amazing experience, that what could go wrong, I can take my little sister in there, I can take my buddies in there. That's not the message we're trying to send. So anyway, Eric, I really do appreciate you sharing that with us. And I think from there we can talk about, okay, how do we avoid these situations? Because I think we all agree these are magical places, and the last thing we want to do is simply not go there.
Well, and I just want to reiterate that the point of that wasn't to scare everyone, because since then I've become incredibly passionate about backcountry skiing. That's kind of what I've transitioned into. But both my daughters are about Lauren's age, are skiers, and so it's a family thing that we love doing together. And I think it's just something to think about of how can you be. I should have been better prepared, and I wasn't. And thankfully, I had a friend who looked out for me, and I got lucky. Ultimately, the only injury I had is I tore some cartilage off of my sternum because I guess I planted my poles when I landed, like to stick the landing, which that wasn't very smart, but that didn't. Anyway, but very lucky, and I think a lot of lessons, Ben. And thanks for bringing all this in the front, because it's important.
Yeah, you betcha. Well, I'm curious. I'm not sure. Actually, I'm pretty sure I saw quite a few of you up there this last week, but we just got done with an incredible storm cycle up there at Mount Hood. For the most part, the temperatures stayed down, and we were lucky enough to have power out at our home 8 straight days. So what were we to do but stay up at Mount Hood and continue skiing and enjoying that for the most part. So Lauren and I were able to get up, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday. Wednesday of last week, and we got on God's Wall, and on the right side, not the main gut, the right side, it was as good as I've ever seen it. It was sunny, it was calm, and the snow was really deep, and it was kind of basically untracked. So we'd both been there before, but it certainly wasn't a race to get down to the bottom ahead of the other one, and we communicated a lot. And as you think back on that, Lauren, what were we talking about on God's Wall?
Well, we basically would go, like, you would tell me one spot to go to a tree or something, and I would ski to that spot, and then I'd wait for you, and then you would come down to that spot, and then we'd find another main spot and just do little parts so we could always see each other.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that kind of line of sight, just breaking down complex terrain, because you look down on something like God's Wall that it's so sustained, so steep, so many trees, really spicy terrain changes, it can be super overwhelming, or you're salivating depending on your appetite for it. But as I take younger groups down, or people that are unfamiliar with it, I think it really helps, just like, where's that next safe spot? What is the risk between this spot and that spot that we need to manage? And away we go from there. And then, as a head coach with this unique program, we really are, I mean, it's our goal to pursue these unique conditions. Safety is priority one. We actually had 3 runs in there with my group this last weekend. And it was like, I mean, it's what it's all about. And watching these athletes approach it, and their confidence growing, their respect for the terrain growing, their competence increasing, turn after turn, section after section, run after run was really incredible. Now, let it be noted that adolescents are pretty good at making terrible decisions, and our job is really to help them make better decisions, right? That we can take them out there, that we can predict the behavior of the group, and we can work through this terrain and continue to push our, what we're comfortable doing in a very fair way and a safe way for everyone, so they do come back. And I think I'm a perfect person for this job, because I've certainly made my fair share of very questionable decisions as an adolescent. So trying to correct the course on that as much as I can. When we look at some of the things that we work on as a team, and that I've learned over my 38 years of skiing now, I've got kind of just a quick top 10 list here that I wanted to share with the group. I think when you are approaching this complex terrain, it's very helpful to identify a leader every time, right? Don't just assume that someone is taking the lead, but really just claim that person that everyone looks to initially, and allow that person to get in front and really kind of steer the group a bit. With that said, I think the number 2 item is everybody needs to feel like they're empowered and that they have a voice, right? You might see something happen. You might feel the snow warmth. You might feel the snow move. You might, see a natural slide that has happened. You might see a person who's in distress, and we want to be able to communicate that and not have everyone feel like, oh, well, this person's a leader, so I'm just going to step back and not say a thing. I think it's also really important that before you even get into that complex terrain, that the group just has a conversation about the goals for the day. What are we trying to accomplish? Where are we comfortable pushing it? Where are we not comfortable pushing it? Being comfortable saying, my mom and dad don't want me in here. My significant other doesn't want me in here. I don't feel comfortable because of some information I read or something you saw in Northwest Avalanche Center, something Ski Patrol's communicated, all of those things. Really making sure everyone does feel comfortable, like, okay, I understand where Jim's at. We're not going down this run for these reasons, and having that shared respect for each other. And then it's also important to identify what kind of safety equipment you have. I mean, we have that conversation with our team all the time. Like, if you don't have a beacon, we're not going into private reserve, plain and simple, full stop. And that can be a tough pill to swallow sometimes. We do have loaner beacons and the like for our team, so there's no reason for them not to have one. But if someone just forgets, it's like, man, I'm sorry, but today it's not your day. So again, identify what your comfort level is and what you need to feel comfortable as a group when it comes to having that equipment, so you can respond to a situation if you need to. Pay attention to ski patrol. I think a lot of times that dynamic can be all across the map. But it's really important. I always go up and talk to ski patrol. What are you seeing? What are you doing? Don't harass them for, oh, drop the line. But it's more like, what are you guys working on? What's the progression of terrain you're trying to open? Because oftentimes they won't open heather because of wind effectiveness, but they might open Jack's Woods on down, or they're not opening private reserve because it got really wet and heavy and is starting to move, but stuff higher up will get moved. So just gather information from ski patrol, build those relationships and trust with them. They'll give you a lot of information you're looking for. I think for me, ducking lines is a non-starter, number 5 on my list. Obviously you can get first tracks, but it can also create a whole lot of trouble for your group, for ski patrol, put other people in peril. So that's kind of a no-brainer. We always talk about skiing using the buddy system, and that's not just out of convenience, like, hey, this is my pal, but it really is starting to get everybody thinking about being accountable for each other and making sure that we minimize the chances of one person getting to the bottom and then turning around and going, wait, where's my buddy? So, again, in that case, you're moving through terrain as a smaller group of 2 and really starting to figure out that level of accountability for each other's safety. Number 7, understand the real risk of tree wells. There's plenty of videos on YouTube. You can just go on YouTube and put, tree well hazards, and you'll see some crazy stuff. But just the way that tree sheds snow, oftentimes the snow between the trunk and those branches never actually fills in with consolidated snow. So if you end up falling head first into that tree well and your skis are still on your feet, it can be really, really damaging, really hard to get air, to be able to communicate to someone you're having trouble. And so as much fun as it is coming from a giant slalom background myself, to get close to trees, it's like, nah, just give them breathing room and really avoid a situation where you might go head first into a tree well. Number 8, almost there. Be very wary of creeks that are buried in the snow. That's another thing that we work on as a group, as we think about, creeks are oftentimes the bottom of a drainage, and that's the train trap. So if the snow comes from above, it's going to really pile in there and make it hard to extract somebody. But it's also one of those things where, and you'll have to pardon the background noise, we got some other family members here making dinner. But it's also a situation where if you do try and cross a bridge, as Eric mentioned, it can go terribly wrong. So making sure we identify safe zones to cross these creeks and regroup as a team, one at a time, eyes on, and really looking out for each other in that way. Number 9 in this day and age, I think, is more of a no-brainer than it used to be back when I started skiing, but wear a helmet. It's kind of like a seatbelt, making sure you protect your head. I can't tell you how many times I'm ripping through the trees and there's like iced lichen hanging off the tree branches, and I go blasting into that. And fortunately, I've got a helmet on to protect my dome, but I've also got a nice welt to remind me that I was hammering it pretty hard. And then I think the final thing that's really important for all of us, but it's really hard to prioritize, is just a little debrief at the end of each day. What did we learn? What went super well? what was the, you know, what were the tough lessons that we learned, so that we can try and learn and evolve each and every day out there in the field, and not just kind of get lucky and then one day have it go terribly wrong and act like, you know, perhaps feel like we're surprised a little bit. So that's my top 10 list that I wanted to share with everybody here. We've also got some time left. I guess I would like to open this up and ask people to please chat in questions, so that we can have it be more conversational. And also, I'd be more than happy to talk more about avalanche safety gear. Like I said, we make sure that all of our team have beacons at a minimum if we're going to go into Heather Canyon and Private Reserve, and then we encourage more and more of them to you know, get packs, put in shovels, probes, and start working on those skills. So I guess I'd be happy to, you know, if anybody, if it would be helpful to show some images of what those efforts look like, I'm happy to do that. Otherwise, I'd also like to just, you know, open it up for questions and see if I can answer some of those for folks. Yes, Kevin, thanks for noticing. This is my new signature piece for my birthday. This is crushed velvet. I wanted everyone to take me seriously, so I figured this would create instant credibility. What are the top recommendations for safety gear? What does the essential pack have in it? So the essentials, I would say, first and foremost, unfortunately, is the most expensive piece and the one you need to replace most often, which is a beacon. A beacon is the electronics device. I don't have mine with me at home right now, but it's about the size of a cell phone, and it basically does two things and two things only. It sends a message or transmits a message when you're in regular ski mode, and then when someone gets caught on an avalanche, everyone who's not caught in that slide switches it to search, and then that will help them locate those transmitted signals. So those run between, I think, 300 and 550 perhaps. Unfortunately, there's no technology in a cell phone that's going to help you, you know, kind of avoid that expense. And I do recommend that you replace those every 3 to 5 years, just because the antennas inside those devices start to break down and not work quite as effectively. So that's the first one, because it allows you to be found in the worst case. And then if you have a shovel, I guess the first thing when you're looking for somebody, and I've got a couple photos here actually that I can share to demonstrate. Yep, I know. I've got my assistant here keeping me on track too. I know, but let me get there first. Okay. So we got that. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, so I'm going to share my screen here. Lauren and I are not professional presenters, but we're working on it. Let's see, so we go to share screen, boom. So here is a picture of Lauren a couple of years ago, and she's holding this device in her hand. And as you can see, she's looking at it and pointing. So what she's reading is just a number signal and an arrow indicating that the beacon is buried, you know, in this certain direction. So then as she moves, let's see, I don't know if I can. Doesn't want to let me do that. So then once she locates the person, she gets closer. Let's see. There we go.
Just press that, it's fine.
Stop share. See, Lauren's not used to these meetings that don't go exactly as you plan every time. So there she is. Okay, so then once she locates a person, she gets closer to the ground, she gets on her hands and knees, make sure she keeps that device always facing in the same direction, moving it left and right, fore and aft. She creates a 1 meter grid in terms of where she thinks that's at. And then you can see she's got those tools right behind her, being this probe sticking out of the snow and this shovel right here.
But also when you get close to it, you have to make like a box around it where you're going to dig and stab with the probe.
That's a great point. Yep, that's that grid that I was mentioning. So want to make sure that we get that zeroed in so that when you do start to strike with this probe, it is something where you're not flying blind. So you can see here, she's got this long staff. It looks much like a tent stake, and that breaks down into your pack quite small. They come, I think, anywhere from 200 to 300 plus millimeters or centimeters long. And I always advise to go longer, right? You'd hate to go all the way down and feel like, man, I wish I had a couple more centimeters in this case. And so go with the longer one. And then you strike down until you hit something that clearly is a body part or a pack or a boot. And often people ask, gosh, what happens if you get stabbed in the face? Well, getting stabbed in the face is probably a whole lot better than being down there and running out of oxygen. But that's where she's striking with the probe so she can locate the person at the bottom. We're going to be there in just a second. And then bear with me. Last but not least, we want to shovel our friend out. So this picture shows Lauren actually standing up, and I think at the time she was 8 or 9, so we're going to let her get away with that one. But typically what you want to do is get down on your hands and knees. There's proper technique to really clear snow out of there. You're typically on a slope, and you want to start working right where that probe is, go down, and then clear everything down and away from where that probe strike is. So when you get down, you're not basically staring down a hole at the person, but you're actually coming in at them sideways, quickly locate their mouth, clear their airway, and then further assess your situation. So these are the steps you go through. These protocols are pretty straightforward. There are all sorts of classes that you can take through the Mountain Shop, through a variety of other organizations, including nonprofits like the Mazamas Climbing Club. Some of those get you a full Avalanche 1 certification and move you on this progression of certifications. Others are more like intro and safety courses. In fact, I think we trained up to 50 athletes and parents this year with the Meadows race team with some of those basic skills that are really about extracting folks if they get in trouble. And then you move towards how do you make better decisions to avoid ever getting caught in avalanches. So there was a fairly long-winded answer. Hopefully that helps you, Kevin, in terms of looking at those things. But again, at the end of the day, the focus is on get that beacon so that people can locate you, and then getting those other devices and carrying those with you makes more and more sense. Let's see. I see. We'll go up to Chad here. Do you have any recommendations for inbound skiing at Bachelor, specifically any areas where you'd carry a beacon? That's a good question. I would imagine in some of those tree areas on Northwest Express, up in the bowl, if that were ever to rip, I imagine that's got potential to rip pretty large. And I think generally in more bold areas, but it's called Flatchler and by some, and so it doesn't have as much of the really steep angle. That 30 to 40 degree pitch is kind of that sweet spot for slides. It doesn't have as much of that, but I think in general, it doesn't hurt to just throw one of those in a pocket and go. So there's an answer for you there, Chad. Do you recommend an Avalanche course? What are some of the best ones in the area? I can only go by my experience. Like I said, I know that through the Mountain Shop and I believe it's CAF Adventures, there's a number of Avi 1 courses. There's another organization called, Mountain Savvy, and they've got 2 ski patrolmen, one of whom was the first person to lay tracks on the upper reaches of K2. So he's got some great experience, as well as a couple summits of Everest. His name's Dave Watson. And those guys are great. I think it's Wes and Dave that run that organization. Oregon Ski Guides has Avi courses. There's also some really cool ones in Central Oregon with Three Sisters Backcountry, where you actually stay, and they're just beautifully built. They're like functional art, these yurts that they've created out at the base of Tam MacArthur Rim. And you actually have some field time some class time inside the yurt, and then you go right out in the field and apply that, which is fantastic. A good friend of mine over in the Wallowas, Victor McNeil, runs the Wallowa Avalanche Center. They've got a lot of courses, but it's a good question. And right now they're just selling like crazy, and it's really hard to get a spot. So it's one of those things that I usually encourage folks, start thinking about doing that like in September before those things fill up. Let's see, Owen, how's it going, Owen? Is there a certain distance I should keep from trees when skiing? Will the snow give way if I ski too close. No, I mean, I would say give it as much berth, maybe 2 feet or a foot or 2 feet away from where the limbs are going into the snow is safe. And the biggest thing you want to make sure is you don't go head first toward that. If you just ski by it, you're not in any danger because your momentum will carry you down the hill. But it's more like if you get hooked up and you go forward, you just don't want to be going head first toward that tree well. So it's almost like keep your momentum going downhill away from the tree versus having a bunch of forward momentum as you're approaching a tree, if that helps and makes sense. Let's see, Thomas, any particular runs in Heather Canyon that are particularly risky? I would say it's more like areas of Heather. I find that I pay most attention to the area like at the bottom of Half Moon Bowl or Moon Bowl, where that creek is either the coverage is very thin or it doesn't get covered at all as you get further down private reserve, like where God's Wall, basically where God's Wall down is. So those areas where you can see that creek, those are the most dangerous in the sense that if you were to break through, you'd have a real problem. I think the patrol on the resort does a really good job of mitigating avalanche risk, although you can still get caught in moving snow. But it's those areas where you're skiing along and all of a sudden, the earth goes out from underneath you that's most uncomfortable. And again, if you're skiing with a buddy, you're keeping eyes on, I think your chances of getting out and having a good time and, getting back for another run are always quite good. Let's see, are there multi-use devices like a Garmin that would function as a beacon and a way to communicate? Unfortunately not. I've spent way too much time listening to podcasts about this very topic and skiing in general. And the belief is that there probably is a lot of room to integrate some of this technology, but that antenna, these functions are so different. So at this point, there isn't anything, and it is, I know the first time I had to buy a beacon for $300, I was like, $300? And I'm going to use it, not that often. Well, using it more often in a resort makes it easier to justify, but it is a very specialized device that just has those 2 functions, transmitting a signal or searching for a signal, unfortunately. Let's see, Demi, is it a good idea to carry a rope in your pack? Hearing how you went down 20 feet has me considering a rope to be safe when boarding or snowboarding. This is where I think we get into that line of how much is too much. And I would say it probably wouldn't hurt to have a pack, especially, a rope. You could throw something out and increase the chance of somebody seeing that. But I would defer. I think, when I do a lot of backcountry skiing, I'll take a 30-meter, what they call kind of a glacier rope. So this isn't something necessarily that I would take rock climbing or expect to take a long whipper off of, but it's more like if you're traveling through glacier terrain and there's crevasses that if some person fell in without a tremendous amount of force, you'd be in good shape. So not a terrible idea to have some lightweight rope, even if you were thinking about maybe I get cliffed out somewhere and I need to rappel down. But I think in most cases in a resort, you're fairly safe. But yeah, err on the side of caution. And I think the biggest thing is how much weight do you want to carry in your pack and deal with when you're getting on the chairlift on and off. Great questions. Keep them coming. I'm going to work my way up. Liz, did you have something you wanted to direct me toward?
Yeah, so I was going to mention 2 things. One, we have a free NWAC avalanche awareness clinic March 11th. It's on our website and in our newsletter. So anyone looking for like a little more in depth about avalanche safety, they go into a lot of really cool details. The last one was awesome. A lot of great questions and a lot of great information out there about just like avalanche safety and like where to look for information about it. The other thing, the multi-use devices, so the Garmin's phones, they interfere with beacons. So if you do have someone go down and you're switching your beacon to search mode, and this is more prevalent in the backcountry, it's a great idea to turn off as many of those devices as you can so that they don't interfere with the signal while you're searching.
Great idea. And what is that, Liz? I've heard 10 inches is roughly the distance you want to have between those devices.
I think different beacons have different recommendations. I think Mammut's is 20 centimeters, which is just over to about 10 inches. There we go. Conversions are hard.
Yeah.
or I guess, yeah, around there. So as far as you can, I try to keep my beacon like in like a hip pocket or like a chest pocket, and then phone down in like a leg pocket on my bibs, as far apart as you can. And again, it's resort skiing, so it's a little bit different. Hopefully you're not getting too close into avalanche terrain that it becomes an issue, but yeah, like Ben said, it happens.
Yeah, and typically what I'll do, I mean, every beacon comes with a little chest harness that usually sits, typically down below your rib cage on the side. I've taken mine out and I just stick it in a hip or a leg pocket. And part of that is because, it's convenient. It's there if I need it. I don't have to worry about digging through layers, and it's not going to get torn off if I do go for a slide. But typically what they say is put it in one layer inside your exterior piece. Again, if you're layering up, layering down, that's a little bit something that's more to manage. But I like it on that hip pocket, because then if I've got a phone, if I got a GoPro, if I've got, an inReach, these various devices, it's quite a ways away from me at my height. And so it's less of an issue to manage there. But that's a great thing to be aware of, is the interference concern and not having those devices on top of each other.
Yeah, for sure. And also if you are able to attend the NWAC clinic, they might talk about how beacons, if any of you guys are science people, they send out like basically like a magnetic wave. So it's not like a direct line between you and the beacon. It's like they make like rings around it, basically. Yes.
Yeah, and you can get these false positives where you're actually facing away from the person. Like I've done it where I'm facing away from the person and it points me 180 degrees in the wrong direction. And then you're like, oh, then the signal gets farther and farther, and you turn around 180 degrees. So there's all sorts of interesting things on that. And you'll find that when you find a signal, you don't go straight line. It's like this arc that it brings you in on. So with a little bit of practice, I found that Lauren and other members of our team and friends and family, they pick it up quick, but it is one of those things where it takes a little bit of practice. And then all of a sudden, we'll do fun little competition things where it's like, okay, who can find the beacon the quickest, and kind of gamify it. But I would say that kind of practice throughout the season is really important. I don't do it enough myself. Some other really great resources beyond the introductory, in-person courses and the actual level 1, level 2, and then pro level courses for certification is just going to these manufacturer websites. So a couple that, one that I really like is G3, Genuine Guide Gear. But G3 has a really cool like G3 University where you can go in and get materials. K2 had some really good content they put out a number of years ago with their backcountry department. I think Black Diamond was another one that was recommended to me. And they just have these repositories of video content that you can go in and refresh yourself on this stuff. And it's evolving and changing. So I try and do that at least, once a year, go in, sit down, consume that content, play with the devices, make sure everything's working, and feel more confident that if something goes wrong, we'll be in a position to do something about it.
For sure. And I'm happy to include links to the things that I have access to in a follow-up email to everyone.
Awesome.
It looks like we had a Q&A question pop up in the Q&A about asking about a beacon park on Mount Hood.
I don't know if there's a formal beacon park, Scott, but what I do know is that I'll often go up to the ski patrol at that really nice ski patrol, I hate to call it a shack, little cabin there at the top of Mount Hood Express, and just ask them, where are the beacons buried today? Because what they do have is they'll go around the resort and they'll bury at least one beacon, and then you can go and try and track it down. So I don't know that they have, like I said, a designated park where they've got a lot of them set up, although that'd be a pretty cool thing to work toward. But oftentimes if you go and ask a patrol up there, they'll let you know where they've got some beacons buried. And I think the more interest that we show in having them do that by asking that question, probably the increased chances that they'll continue to build that out for us. And at other resorts, they definitely have those parks set up, which is really cool.
Yeah, and that is something that Mount Hood Institute, a newer nonprofit that one of our other ambassadors is heavily involved in. They're working to create some kind of beacon check or beacon park up on the mountain so that people can practice. So stay tuned.
Yeah.
Hopefully something coming in the next year or two, but COVID kind of threw a wrench in everything.
Little bit. Well, great.
Yeah. Is there any other questions anyone has?
Wait, Wait, wouldn't the beacon thing confuse someone and make it think that someone is stuck in the snow?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I think that typically what they do at these beacon parks is they put them in a spot that isn't really avalanche terrain. So that's one thing I hear a lot too, is like, gosh, it's high avalanche danger. Can I go ski? And I think the safest, answer from a liability perspective is probably shouldn't. But the other thing that I've learned over time is, working with a lot of backcountry professionals, is this notion that to have an avalanche, you have to have a specific angle, you have to have a bed surface, and then you have to have a slab. And so the notion of, could you go out to a football field and, play a game of catch if there was high avalanche danger? And the answer is yeah, because that's never going to slide. It's a flat surface. And so I think these avalanche parks are oftentimes in flat zones or zones that are managed. Therefore, the snow is not going to slide. And so if someone skis by, they'd have to be in search, which they probably wouldn't be unless they were an avalanche terrain searching for somebody. And then also keeping in mind that, is that terrain even prone to slide? So I think yeah.
And a lot of times in the NWAC forecast too, they'll say like high avalanche danger, stay below slopes that are, or off of slopes greater than 30 degrees or 35 degrees. And they'll specifically call that out. So, but that's a good point, Lauren.
It is. In fact, I'll go to NWAC right now and maybe we can look at a forecast, because I can tell you that when I started backcountry skiing, like a lot of other things, I would be super safe, and I'd only backcountry ski in the spring when there were, when the snow had gone isothermic and there was a really low likelihood of anything sliding. And then once I got into the avalanche, or did more of it, sometimes you'd see some stuff go really wrong and got terrified and didn't ever want to go at all. And then once I took the Avalanche course, it really helped me understand, oh, there are very specific problems that we need to manage against. And it allowed me to really focus in on those instead of being overwhelmed by all the different types of slides and all the different aspects. So I always recommend, and again, this is overkill probably for going to a resort, but if you're going to the backcountry, taking a look at, the NOAA forecast within the areas that you want to operate in, the ski resort forecast, look at Ski Bowl, look at Meadows, look at Timberline, and then go to NWAC and get an avalanche forecast just to sort of gather all these data points and then understand, what should I be focused on and paying attention to? So red X, as in many cases, that's a pretty terrifying thing. So above tree line, currently we're looking at avalanche danger on Mount Hood of high. Near tree line is considerable, below tree line considerable. They've got the legend down here to help you kind of make sense of that. But then as we scroll down, we've got some more information here, and it says the avalanche problem number 1 is wind slab. So all this wind typically blowing from the west to the east and creating these big slabs on those lee slopes. Another person I know had posted that the cornices that typically form dropping into White River Canyon just to, I guess, Looker's right of Timberline, that whole thing ripped. And it ripped deep because all of that snow that had fallen got blown across the Palmer snowfield and deposited on that lee slope, got a little bit of sun, warmed it up, and the whole thing ripped and deposited down into the White River. So that's,
it was like a mile long.
Yeah, really. I mean, Mother Nature raging. It was breathtaking to see. Just the photos, obviously. I didn't see the thing go. And so it talks about what is the problem here. This is a wind slab. Where are those aspects? In this case, they're saying, this is above tree line, near tree line, below tree line, these rings, and they're saying all the way around the mountain, not just isolated aspects. It talks about, is it almost certain, very unlikely? So you get a sense here of the likelihood, and then the size, small D1, large D2. And again, these things have more detailed explanations behind them, but obviously you'd want to err on the side of small and not historic. So we've got this information, we've got some photos. We're doing a much better job with these avalanche forecasting sites of not only using a similar template for the site, so you start getting in there and it's like getting into an American car. It's like steering wheel on the left, I've got some controls on the right, increasingly I got computer screens to play with, but they're familiar, and so these websites are getting more familiar as well. And then in this case, avalanche number 2, we've got a storm slab. We see that's not a very big issue up high, but as we get lower on the mountain, that becomes an issue. information. They start to break that down with photos and images, more of a forecast discussion. And then again, they're really asking people to, even if you don't consider yourself a professional observer, please share this information so that other people can benefit from it. And as Liz and I were mentioning, here's a picture of that whole slab that ripped recently. It looks like it's maybe up there 8,000, 8,500 feet, all the way down to tree line at 6,000 feet. The whole thing slid. And man, that would have been a really cool thing to witness, and obviously something to avoid. So these observations are really helpful in just giving people a sense of what's happening, where it's happening. And again, instead of just going into it and just being gripped and feeling like I'm putting myself and my family at risk and my friends, you can go into it and say, okay, I've got a little bit more information that I can focus on as I go up and do my thing in the backcountry. So lots of good information in here to devour. And oftentimes, like if it's not COVID time, I'm just rolling up with my friend. I have them on the phone, checking reports while I'm driving, or vice versa. And then once we get, boots on the ground and we're all salivating to make the most of the time that we've got some good information, and we're not just flying blind.
We had one more question pop up in the chat asking about how steep are some of the steeper runs at Meadows and Heather Canyon and Clark Canyon.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I would say that God's Wall off the top is very steep, 50 to 60 degrees, which, I'm not sure if you stood up there, but it humbles me every single time I do. And Lauren, you were up there for the first time last week, right?
Yeah.
What did you think?
It was really scary.
Is that a place you want to practice your kickstarts for racing? Probably not. Yeah, it's pretty steep up there. And obviously anything that's like you're going to air off of, that's probably vertical, right? But those are just kind of intermittent little features as you go. Heather Canyon, I think, is in that 30 to 40 degree pitch.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you get higher up on A zone, and where it wraps around to the right, kind of wraps around to the right and goes up around to the corner to Super Bowl, that gets up in there to probably 45, 50 degree aspects as well. And those are areas, Super Bowl specifically, where if you're going to boot up from the Cascade Chairlift, oftentimes they won't even let you boot up and ski down unless you have a pack with all those tools in there, and ski patrols up there just trying to facilitate, safe travel for everybody. So it increasingly is becoming a mandate if you want to get into some of that terrain. And I think until then, some of these practices might be just, a good deal. Yeah. Oh, and my wife, Christy, here was just mentioning that Meadows has been doing a better job of communicating that on the website. Because in some cases, like I think it was December 20th, there was a slide in Moon Bowl that wasn't very widely broadcast. And, spare any opinion on that, but it wasn't broadcast. But a guy was literally riding down on a snowboard. This was reported on Teton Gravity Research's forum. And he just heard someone under the snow at the bottom of the slide path. And he stopped and literally didn't have any tools himself, found this person by hearing, and dug him out with a ski. And he was buried, he's buried above his head and couldn't move anything. And so like these things can happen. And I don't need to give you any more terrifying examples, but that one I think is probably in that 35 to 40 degree zone that is just prime for some of the best skiing turns of your life. And it's also highly prone to slide.
Wow. Yeah. That's lucky that someone heard him and that he was able to speak up about it too.
Oh man. Yeah.
Wow.
Really wild.
Ski with a buddy and ski with your gear, your safety gear.
Yep. Yeah. I think Lauren wishes her pocket was a little bit bigger on her powder pants for that beacon, but we're just getting used to stuffing it in there and having that thing on, and away we go.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else to add? Any last minute tips, tricks? Lauren, anything from you before we wrap it up? No?
Awesome.
Awesome.
Appreciate everybody joining us. Looks like we kept most of you the whole time. So hopefully you took some good nuggets. And like I said, our goal is really not to scare anybody away from these places. I think it's really just, I find that, we're, as more of this stuff happens and it's shared in social media, it's normalized. And what I want to make sure is that we do approach these things in a way that we're thoughtful of it. We understand the risk, and we go out there. It's like we have these long moments are these, you know, long periods. It's like freeway driving, where it's long periods and you're just like, what could go wrong? And then there's those brief moments where we really got to bring our A game, be thinking about it as a group, communicating really effectively, and then lining up these runs that, you know, we'll remember for years to come. And hopefully not in the same way Eric remembers his plunge into the creek back in the late 90s. So yeah, thank you, Eric, for joining. Thank you, everybody else, for coming. I think most of you know how to get in touch with me if there are any follow-up questions that Lauren or I can answer. And we certainly look forward to seeing everybody out there soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric, for sharing your firsthand experience. That was super eye-opening and definitely makes me think twice when skiing over in Heather Canyon. Lauren, thanks for talking us through your trip down God's Wall and how you guys took that bit by bit and one step at a time. And Ben, thanks for putting all of this together. This is awesome. Sharing your 38 years of experience, your approach to skiing, the fun stuff, and inbounds with your team, with your family, and with your ski partners. And everyone who tuned in, thanks. Keep an eye out for a follow-up email. In the next couple of days, I'll send out some of the links that we talked about and the websites and stuff that Ben mentioned as well. So with that, we'll sign off. Have a good night, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.
Adios.
Bye.